Who are some of the actual halfway intelligent scammers out there? Let's get right to it, starting with number 3, the old wine and whiskey scam. Casey Alexander and his accomplices defrauded elderly investors out of over $13 million through a scam involving whiskey and wine investments. Although the group was based in the UK, they largely targeted people in the US. Alexander had established 3 businesses: Winn LLC, Windsor Jones LLC, and Vintage Whiskey Casks to legitimize his operation. The company's website featured various promotional videos, including one where Alexander gave viewers a distillery tour. The Windsor Jones' website boasted that it had illustrious investment-grade wine. Alexander told victims that the companies would identify and purchase fine wines and whiskeys on their behalf, and then store the spirits in a UK warehouse to later sell for profit. The scammers cold-called their victims and persuaded them to invest in the operation. The callers were aggressive and used deceptive tactics to get people to invest with the promise that the victims would receive massive returns. After the initial investment, Alexander and his team would continue their communication through email or phone. They pressured victims to keep investing that sweet money by dangling the carrot of even higher returns if they purchased even more inventory. An 89-year-old man from Ohio thought he was investing in rare sweet wines and paid for them to be sent to a storage locker in France. He sent wire transfers and made out checks to Winn, investing $300,000 in the scam over 18 months. A 73-year-old victim from Michigan initially wired Winn over $25,560. When the scammers told her she would receive a potential 35% to 40% profit, she invested $60,000 more. Another victim reported the situation to local police, who alerted the FBI. Investigators uncovered the scope of the operation and connected similar frauds committed across the country. So the FBI set up a sting to catch Alexander. They tapped a man charged in an unrelated case and convinced him to pose as a potential investor to receive a lesser sentence. Then the FBI spoke to one of Alexander's employees, who claimed to have accepted the job without researching the company. The employee also revealed that Alexander would be visiting Ohio soon. When Alexander arrived, the FBI arrested him. Alexander admitted to orchestrating the operation and pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit wire fraud at a U.S. district court. The judge permitted him to travel to the UK before a sentencing hearing in July 2023. He faces a maximum of 20 years in jail and a $250,000 fine. That kind of punishment is nothing to whine about. Number 2. Trust me, I'm a prince. In the 1990s, Saqib Mumtaz plotted and carried out one of the biggest jewelry heists of the decade. Mumtaz convinced a friend to pose as the Sultan of Brunei's brother to steal $2 million in jewelry from Bijan Jewelers in Beverly Hills. Mumtaz and 3 friends told the jeweler that the Prince of Brunei wanted to purchase a selection of necklaces and watches for a wedding. They persuaded the jeweler to travel to London with a bag of precious stones and other jewelry. Mumtaz was inspired after learning that the Sultan of Brunei had recently visited Bijan Jewelers, making it believable that the Prince of Brunei would be interested in the jeweler's services. Since this happened in 1996, the group had to use magazines to research and plan their heist. The internet was still based off of AOL trial CDs, so the research was difficult. They also had to execute the entire operation using burner phones. The crew contacted the jeweler, and since people as wealthy as the Prince of Brunei don't talk about money, they luckily never had to talk about money. Mumtaz and his accomplices pretended to be the Prince of Brunei's representatives and took extensive measures to appear authentic. They used stolen credit cards to create the illusion of wealth, which they also used to make extravagant purchases. They pretended to talk to the jeweler from a satellite phone on a private jet, even though Mumtaz and his friends were in a kitchen in Manchester, UK. The group needed the jeweler to believe that the Prince of Brunei would be in London and that the jeweler was dealing with royalty. They also needed to glamorize their surroundings to one fitting of a prince. So they arranged a private jet, security, limousines, and a 5-star hotel. They even placed flowers on the runway when the jet landed to make sure sure they nailed every detail. Using the private jet and having bodyguards made the operation feel real, since the Prince of Brunei would obviously need security and thought private jets were the only way to travel. While the operation was complex, the planning was second nature for Mumtaz, who had made a living out of credit card fraud long before the heist. Saqib Mumtaz had lived a double life for years. Sometimes he was a well-behaved college student living at home with a part-time job. Others, he was a world-traveling con man living a luxurious life. He operated with the help of 3 friends to commit credit card fraud. Mumtaz and his friends went on elaborate trips, repeatedly charging the stolen credit cards. The group didn't want to resort to the same type of petty crimes like the other people in their hometown. They had a skewed idea of what constitutes a crime, thinking that using non-violent methods meant their crimes were mild in comparison. Their most elaborate trip was to Las Vegas in the days when the MGM Grand Hotel and Casino was a new feature of Sin City. The group traveled to watch Mike Tyson fight and reveled in the city's bright lights, traveling in limousines and living the high life. The group met up with Will Smith and Tupac Shakur at their hotel. The 2 celebrities treated Mumtaz and his crew like equals, and Mumtaz even gave them his number if they ever traveled to England. Mumtaz might have been able to fall below the radar if he carried on with just credit card theft, but he set his sights on the elaborate jewelry heist instead. Mumtaz asked the jewelers not to declare the diamonds for tax purposes, making it much harder to prove their worth. One of Mumtaz's friends posed as the Prince of Brunei, and the elaborate measures the group took to fool the jewelers seemed to be working. Jewelers didn't even bring a bodyguard. The Bijan representatives traveled to a London hotel in a limousine arranged by Mumtaz. The next day, the friend posing as the prince met the jewelers with his own bodyguard. After the jewelers handed over the jewelry for him to examine, he left, apparently satisfied. Everything was going perfectly until it wasn't. Right after the jewels were handed off, Mumtaz's carefully planned operation began falling apart. The fake prince got in the limousine and went on his way, but his phone died during the ride. So the friend used the driver's phone to call Mumtaz, creating a link between the vehicle's phone and Mumtaz's. The driver needed to use the restroom and randomly pulled over. Mumtaz, feeling a little nervous at this point, insisted his friend get as far away from the scene as possible, so the fake prince hopped on the subway. He took the train to Leeds, where he exchanged the bag of jewels with Mumtaz. Although Mumtaz had promised to protect his friend from the police quickly caught up to the fake prince. Another friend entered police custody, whom Mumtaz had asked to buy a cell phone. Mumtaz instructed the friend to go somewhere where there wouldn't be security cameras, so the friend went to a department store, where there were cameras that caught surveillance footage of the transaction. Since law enforcement had already caught 2 of the people involved in the operation, one of Mumtaz's accomplices panicked and was ready to confess to the entire thing. It turned out that the police had been following the group for weeks after the heist and had already found one piece of jewelry on one of Mumtaz's other accomplices. Mumtaz's arrest was inevitable, and after years of going undetected for various crimes, it was time for him to face his punishment. Mumtaz received a 3.5-year sentence after pleading guilty to 2 counts of conspiring to steal and 2 of obtaining property by deception. His accomplices, including the friend that posed as the prince, admitted to similar charges. Their sentences ranged from 3.5 years to 1 year, except for one who received a conditional discharge. During his incarceration, Mumtaz became remorseful and upset about the embarrassment he'd caused his family. Despite the group serving jail time, the jewels' whereabouts are unknown. Mumtaz claimed in an interview that he thought the Russian mafia took them to settle some debts. And before we get to the last story, if you're enjoying this video, be sure to stay tuned about how this supposed multi-millionaire business guru was exposed to still be living at his parents' house. Number 1. Thank you for testing. Young Playboy scammer Danielle Saqib turned COVID-19 travel restrictions into a business opportunity, selling negative test certificates so people could still go on living life. Saqib lived in the UK, and his main gig was working at a bank, although he did other jobs on the side to make more cash. He also sold at least 50 forged COVID test documents, which travelers had to carry to enter most countries during the height of the pandemic. Saqib also ran an illegal business franchise where he traded the certificate template to others for $630 each. Saqib's lucrative business funded his extravagant expenses. He took elaborate vacations to Dubai, where he rented luxury cars like a Range Rover, Mercedes G-Wagon, Mercedes GTC, Mercedes GTS, and a Mercedes S63. While abroad, Saqib flaunted his trips on Snapchat, enjoying glamorous nights at a rooftop nightclub and bragging about spending $635 in a night while partying. Saqib also boasted about spending $380 for a night alone with an Instagram model. Saqib didn't seem concern about the repercussions of his actions and openly advertised his services on social media. Since it was impossible for airlines and border staff to verify that every single document they saw was genuine, Saqib claimed it was an easy loophole to exploit. Saqib wasn't worried about discussing his operation, even with strangers. Saqib divulged details about his scam and how he ran it to undercover Daily Mail reporters who wrote an article about Saqib's criminal activities. Saqib was inspired when his cousin had to get a travel certificate for a trip to Pakistan. After learning that his cousin only needed his date of birth, address, and full name, Saqib realized how easy the con would be. He had found a hole in the system. None of the certificates had unique numbers, barcodes, or any other way to verify them. Although airlines and border agents could call clinics to check the validity of the certificate, the likelihood of them doing so was extremely slim. Doctors were also far too busy dealing with the pandemic to answer the phone, and airline workers didn't have the capacity to call hundreds of doctors across the world. And even if someone did call a doctor to discuss someone's negative COVID-19 test, it was likely the doctor wouldn't be able to give confidential information over the phone anyway. Saqib sold his certificate for $95, a fraction of the cost of a legitimate travel certificate. They were under the name of a respected chain of private clinics called Same Day Doctor and had the signature of one of the company's doctors. Same Day Clinics stated they had nothing to do with the scam and were appalled that travelers were using their documents to lie about having negative tests. The certificates didn't require the same unique codes implemented for vaccines. Once Saqib had a template, he just needed to change the names, addresses, and dates of birth. Travelers who either had COVID-19 or didn't want to pay for legitimate certificates boarded planes and went worldwide, furthering the virus's spread. Saqib claimed, when he spoke to the undercover reporters, that the global rollout of the COVID-19 vaccine wouldn't slow him down. He planned on selling similar certificates as proof of immunization, although he would have to contend with the fact that vaccine cards would come with unique ID numbers. Saqib's operation was one of many that exploited loopholes in the new, but now mostly defunct, travel certificate regulations. Certain countries took matters into their own hands, such as the UAE, which issued a visa ban on Kenyans visiting the country after finding visitors were using forged documents. Despite the Daily Mail releasing Saqib's name and confessions, police have yet to show interest in or arrest Saqib for his actions. However, doctors and other professionals did call for stricter measures with travel certificates to avoid this type of criminal activity.
Gurvind Singh seemed to be living the high life, posting images of his high-end jewelry and fancy cars to support his claim that he made millions on the foreign exchange market. He promised that other people could follow his advice to become wealthy beyond their wildest dreams. In reality, Singh, or Gurvs, as he called himself on Instagram, was selling nothing more than a pipe dream that cost many investors money they couldn't afford to lose. All these promises are red flags even a new investor should recognize. According to an in-depth investigation by journalist Mobeen Azhar, Gurvind used his social media accounts to sell the false hope of guaranteed financial windfalls for anyone who invested their money into his scheme. Although Singh apparently raked in about £3 million, the evidence shows it was through scamming naive people out of their savings rather than finding a profitable investment strategy. To convince social media users that he was the real deal, he made impossible promises that even the most experienced money managers wouldn't touch. Specifically, Singh promised his investors that they'd never lose any money. While most people disregarded his call to action, this 20-year-old scammer reportedly convinced roughly 1,200 individuals to send their cash. A few made it through the experience, only losing a few £100s. Others handed over as much as £88,000 that they never saw again. Singh's ego-boosting posts portrayed a young man with an undeniable knack for making a buck. At one point, he claimed his savvy investing skills turned £200 into a whopping £100,000. The huge return on such a small initial investment was clearly enticing to others who wanted a piece of the action. He took the grift further by suggesting that investors could expect to make £300 per day if they followed his lead and trusted him with their cash. He deleted old social media accounts and started new ones before settling on the handle @Mr.Gerbs. Still, his content remained centered on the same false promises and fabricated evidence of his personal wealth. One of his most popular posts depicted him handing out money to random strangers as if he had so much that he didn't know what else to do with it all. Singh presented himself as a reputable trader in the foreign exchange or Forex market. In reality, watchdog organizations and regulators kept a close eye on his claims and ultimately warned the public that he was not properly licensed to make the type of investments peddled online. Forex trading is a broad term that can refer to any transaction that exchanges one international currency for another. While reputable investors can make a healthy profit, the global financial system is full of fraud. One attorney specializing in such scams said that her law firm has taken up thousands of cases in which victims said they were conned out of their savings by a Forex fraudster. It's bad enough that Singh conned so many people, but the fact that investors lost all their money on Christmas Eve added insult to injury. One of those individuals, identified only as Jonathan, shared a story that was similar to many others who fell for the investment scheme. He was 24 years old at the time and saving money to buy a home. Most of the people who found Singh through Instagram were also in their early 20s. Although Jonathan said he frequently scrolled through social media to find funny posts and memes, sometimes an investment influencer would catch his eye. After he spotted the viral video showing Singh handing money to folks on the street, he became intrigued with the idea of investing in the system. Jonathan sent Singh a message, and the reply indicated that a £500 initial deposit would be required to move forward. It was a no-brainer for Jonathan, who was clearly impressed by the luxury cars and expensive tastes displayed on Singh's Instagram account. The first step involved joining a group message to learn more about the process. After being told he'd earn £100 right off the bat, Jonathan decided to sink more of his £17,000 savings into the scheme. Days later, Singh said the initial investment had nearly doubled and was worth £30,000. Jonathan knew the inherent risks associated with trading and investing. Ironically, he said it was rare to lose an entire investment. After learning all of his profits had been wiped out in December 2020, he realized how wrong he was. He remembers the losses coming quickly as £27,000 turned to £9,000 on Christmas Eve. Jonathan watched helplessly as more and more of his money evaporated into thin air. He said he assumed that the millionaire investor was working within the confines of British regulators at the Financial Conduct Authority, but he was wrong. In fact, the agency issued a strongly worded advisory confirming that Singh was not affiliated with the FCA and urging prospective investors to think twice before giving him any money. Making matters worse, Singh and others involved in the scheme went back on their earlier promise that Jonathan would be able to take his money out whenever he wished. While he was obviously distraught over the whole situation, he said that others lost substantially more, including some investors who were scammed out of their entire life savings and found out about it the day before Christmas. Singh's scheme attracted significant attention outside of the social media realm. Veteran journalist Mobi Nazar was among the most prominent sources of information and compiled all of his evidence to create a compelling documentary titled Scam City, Money, Mayhem, and Maseratis. After his marks lost millions, Singh appeared eager to put the whole ordeal behind him. In fact, he launched yet another scheme online to target young people interested in investing. As media reports noted, his Instagram profile was scrubbed of any references to his prior Forex trading rhetoric, and in its place was promotional material about a new business called Academy to Earn. This venture, he claimed, consisted of an internet-based educational program designed to share the fundamentals of online marketing and sales. While Singh might have pivoted away from his prior strategy, Nazar wasn't prepared to let him get away scot-free. Instead, the investigative reporter hunted for clues and interviewed a long line of people who claimed they were swindled out of their savings by a smooth-talking social media user. This 4-part documentary aired on BBC Two and received plenty of critical acclaim. However, it was just the latest in a series of scandals and controversies he'd attempted to expose by digging deep into the relevant facts. His impressive portfolio includes reports on topics including U.S. drone strikes in the Middle East, the life of LGBTQ individuals in Pakistan, and an award-winning expose about a police-related incident in the United Kingdom. Nazar also completed a labor-intensive book containing various details from the life of the late singer-songwriter Prince. After interviewing fraud experts and the apparent victims of the investment scheme, Nazar tried to get some information from the source, found out where Singh was living, though it didn't reflect the lavish life he'd been selling on Instagram. Instead, the journalist found him him living with his parents in London. They were all sharing an ordinary house. There were no signs of the wealth Singh allegedly amassed through his expert knowledge of the foreign exchange market. When Azhar confronted him outside of the home, it became clear that Singh wasn't ready to go on the record. Instead of responding to the reporter's questions, the accused scammer hid in a nearby store. A few moments later, Singh made his escape. He hustled down the street with his girlfriend while Azhar was hot on his tail. Then the tight-lipped scammer hopped in his car and drove off, leaving Azhar with more questions than answers. As Singh received increased scrutiny from the media, he decided to publicly address the allegations against him. Unsurprisingly, he blamed others for the fact that his scheme lost money. Specifically, he pointed the finger at Infinox, a brokerage firm that put the entire plan in motion. For its part, a Bahamas-based branch of the company claimed it operated within the confines of the law and denied any wrongdoing. On the other hand, Singh insisted that he agreed to a deal with the firm to attract investors and claimed he didn't know at the time that the partnership was doomed to fail. Infinox UK has also distanced itself from Infinox Bahamas and said that the British-based branch had nothing to do with any agreement to market the investment scheme. Official documents suggest that Infinox Bahamas took the lead in determining where to invest the money. Still, its CEO asserted that Singh's actions were why those investments ultimately went south. A series of WhatsApp conversations also surfaced, revealing that victims were being told that their investments were making money. In reality, they'd been shedding profits since at least 2019. The individuals in charge of managing these accounts appeared eager to downplay any evidence that the investments were losing money. Eventually, the combined value of these assets dipped below £4 million. All the accounts were closed and the investors lost all their money. The evidence suggests that Infinox Bahamas played a central role in developing and marketing this corrupt investment plan. Nevertheless, Azhar's documentary series revealed details that emphasize Singh's involvement in defrauding investors. The bottom line is that there's clearly enough blame to go around, even if no one involved wants to accept their share of the responsibility. Amid all of the finger-pointing at play in this story, Singh hopes he'll convince critics that he's just one of the victims. He continues to tell the world that his only error was signing a contract in good faith that resulted in a series of ill-advised trades and ultimately cost investors millions. In his mind, he was just a young entrepreneur trying to make a name for himself when he fell victim to a business that offered him a misleading contract. He also shared his desire to sit down with regulators at the FCA to address the organization's depiction of him as an unauthorized financial services provider. For what it's worth, the FCA still included its warning about Singh on its official website, even as he tried to shift the blame to Infinox. When they asked about the contents of Azhar's documentary, Singh opted to keep his mouth shut. So far, Singh has not been charged with the crime, although it's unclear whether the legal system will ever hand down justice for the perpetrators and victims. There's no doubt that the underlying scam will attract significant attention for years to come. Thankfully, folks like Jonathan are willing to discuss their staggering financial losses. Meanwhile, Azhar and other brave journalists continue digging up details and following the facts wherever they lead.
Click to watch one of these next videos. Let us know in the comments section what you would rather be: 70 and be worth $1 billion, or 20 and be worth 100 grand.